Our topic is diabetes in pregnancy. So, as you know, that diabetes can be of different types, and the majority of women who will have pre-existing diabetes, they will have like type 1 insulin-dependent diabetes. Why it will be there? Because either they are not producing enough insulin, or the receptors they are not working and they are resistant to the actions of the insulin. Can be of any type, but they would have been diagnosed long time before they become pregnant. Because usually when one is a teenager, even before the age of 10, the diabetes is diagnosed, and they will be already following up somewhere, and most likely they would have received preconceptual counseling. So we expect to see a better sugar control, but sometimes even they can come to you with unplanned pregnancies. And the number of the women with type 2 diabetes, it has increased recently, and mostly, there are some diagnostic factors, some associated factors, like they depend upon the race of the person. Like mostly we will see that in Africans or the Asian descent people, even the Gulf people like that. And usually if you can divide them into two distinct groups, like those type 1, with type 1, they are younger, and their BMI is most likely to be normal, because there the cause is in the function. Like there is autoimmune destruction of the insulin producing beta cells into the pancreas or the tissue, they are not responding to the insulin. But the type 2 diabetes, it is also called lifestyle disorder. Most commonly, it is associated with old age, obese people, and they will have like higher rate of unplanned pregnancy as compared to the type 1 diabetes. You should keep that in your mind, okay? And then such pregnant women, they will seem to have at least the same risk as those of the women who have type 1 diabetes mellitus. Like those who have been diagnosed with type 2, so their risk profile is similar to that of the some, but it would be matching not 100%, but overlapping with those who have type 1 diabetes. So the maternal complications that will arise as a result of the pregnancy, they can be either acute, they can be new presentations, or can be exacerbation. If I tell you about the numbers, that which type of diabetes is the most common, then you should remember that GDM is the most common type of diabetes that we are seeing in the pregnancy. GDM is the most common, like 87% patient, write down this number. 87% patients, they will have GDM, and 7.5% they will have type 2 diabetes, and like 5% they will have type 1 diabetes. Okay, so we are concerned about diabetes because it can cause both acute problems in the pregnancy, and it can be due to exacerbation of the long-standing problems. Mostly in the diabetes, we are going to see problems at the microvasculature level. Like there will be deposition of thickening of the intima, blood vessels, they will become narrow, there will be deposition of their fats. So, and there can be you are going to see like due to these vascular changes, you can see neuropathy, nephropathy, retinopathy. These three pathies are very common, right? Other problems can also occur. So let's see that
Yes.
what are the effects of pregnancy on mother. Mother can also have acute problems like hypoglycemia, ketoacidosis. She will become more prone to infections because of the diabetes, and then the pregnancy is immunocompromised state. Then she can even go into coma. Remember that ketoacidosis, most commonly it is associated with type 1 diabetes, but can occur in type 2 also. But in type 2, mostly you are going to see coma because of the hyperglycemia. The patient can go into coma. So it will swing both ways. The type 2, it can also present with keto. And the long-standing issues will be microvascular, then nephropathy, retinopathy, and worsening blood sugar controls. And you know that there will be like there can be neuropathy also all along the way like that. Then there are certain effects of diabetes on the pregnancy, like mother can have a miscarriage, mother can have gestational hypertension on over a background of vascular changes, preeclamptic toxemia of pregnancy, cesarean section rates are higher, rates of urinary tract infections are higher, other infections more common, and mother can also have obstetric trauma. Like she can have third or fourth degree perineal tear, she can have PPH, she can have atonic uterus. So all of these are possible. The baby can have the similar profile of problems, like more if the blood sugar is uncontrolled, There can be congenital abnormalities, like in the cardiovascular system, most common. Then renal, neural tube defect, microcephaly, sacral agenesis. Baby can also have hypoglycemia, like when the baby is born, baby will become hypoglycemic very immediately. Why? Because he was growing in a hyperinsulinemic environment. So after birth, insulin level will be very high and the baby has not taken any feed, so baby is very likely to be hypoglycemic. How you will know that the baby is hypoglycemic? Because the capillary blood glucose level will be less than 2 milligrams per deciliter. So the baby is hypoglycemic. Baby will have jaundice and may need phototherapy. Baby will have hypomagnesemia, will have hypocalcemia. All of these problems will be there. Stillbirth can be there, perinatal mortality, polyhydramnios. Then due to size of the baby, there can be birth injuries, shoulder dystocia, fractures, brachial plexus injury, asphyxia also. Why asphyxia? Because in the diabetics, these phosphatidylglycerols, they are not developing, so the we won't have this surfactant. So in the absence of surfactant, the alveoli, they are going to collapse, so the baby can become asphyxiated very quickly. Baby can show two spectrums: a macrosomic, if there is like plenty of glucose in the environment, or there can be fetal growth restriction if there are like microvascular changes. So we have to pay attention to the both parts of the spectrum. Then baby can have postnatal adaptation problems like that. So many things can be there. So what happens? Why somebody is going to develop type 1 and type 2 diabetes? They both have like heritable factors, and the parents, they can be concerned and warned that children of a parent with type 1 diabetes, they have a 5 to 6% increased risk of developing the same type of diabetes. And the children of a parent with type 2 diabetes, they have a 10 to 15% increased risk of developing type 2 diabetes mellitus. And children of a mother who develops GDM, they are at an increased risk of obesity and diabetes in later life. All of these are severe questions. Okay, if the mother has type 1 diabetes, the chance of children having the diabetes is going to be 5 to 6%. And the chance of having diabetes will increase if the mother has type 2 diabetes, and it will increase to 10 to 15%. In the type, with GDM, also there is a risk that baby will be diabetic, but what is the incidence? It has not been quantified. So talking about the general features, the aim pre-pregnancy, if a patient has risk factors, they should be evaluated pre-pregnancy. And they should have hemoglobin A1C level below 48 millimoles or 6.5%. We call it glycated hemoglobin also because it gives us a more objective and more clinically validated level of the glucose in the body than the random blood sugar level or other issues like that. So women with an hemoglobin A1C level above 86 millimoles per mole or 10% should be advised against pregnancy because she is going to develop many complications. And we should aim to keep the blood sugar level below 5.3 millimoles, and after 1 hour postprandial blood glucose level should be below 7.8 millimoles per liter. And the women, if they are taking like insulin, they should be advised to maintain their blood glucose level above 4 millimoles per liter. And women are advised to test their blood glucose like 4 to 7 times daily. All of these are SBA questions, okay? They should be
4 to 7 times per day?
4 to 7 during the day, depending upon their control. This is in general, but with the type specific, we will talk about that in a while. During
So
the day.
okay.
Okay, that is the point. In continuous glucose monitoring, it should be reserved for pregnant women on insulin with problematic hypoglycemia or an unstable blood glucose level. Good glycemic control, it can decrease the risk of miscarriage, congenital malformation, stillbirth, and neonatal death. So many things they can be prevented if we are having a good control of diabetes. That is also one point. Okay. So regarding gestational diabetes, yeah. You have any question?
No, it's clear so far.
Okay. So When you have a patient with diabetes, what you should be telling them? So depends that where you are. Always pay attention to the location where they have given you the patient. Read the question very carefully. Okay. So see that this patient has come for the pre-pregnant preconception planning and care or what. So you should give information in an easy way to the woman and tell them that if they have like blood glucose control well before the conception, then and they maintain good control, then like I mentioned, the risk of having these complications will be very low. And you need to tell them that the chance of having these problems will decrease, but it will not be fully eliminated. Like it will be we will try our level best to control everything, but still our control may fall inadequate and we can develop some problems. And whenever they are making a plan to conceive, we have to give them counseling information that how diabetes is going to affect pregnancy and how pregnancy is affecting diabetes, like I have just shown you, right? Because whenever you are talking about medical disorders, you need to see that what will be the effect on pregnancy and what will be the effect on the baby, like that. Okay, so that's
Yeah.
why effect of pregnancy on mother, on disease, and effect of disease on the pregnancy. So basically we are referring to like diabetes in pregnancy. This is the nice guideline. Okay? That is the point. So, and then we have to see, explain that there is a role of diet, exercise, and the BMI. What are the effects? Body weight should be optimized. And we have to inform them that they can have very low blood sugar level without even realizing that the blood glucose level has dropped. Okay? Because you know the most of the signs and symptoms of diabetes, they are confused with the general condition of the woman, like that. They will say that it is because of the diabetes, it is because of the pregnancy, then you know these problems can occur. Then we have to tell them that how they should become aware of the hypoglycemia, that what will be the signs and symptoms, and have to inform them that a baby who is large for gestational age and it will increase the likelihood of birth trauma, induction of labor, and cesarean deliveries, like I mentioned before. And then we need to assess them for diabetic retinopathy before and during pregnancy. We also need to assess the risk of diabetic nephropathy before pregnancy. And then maternal blood glucose level should be maintained during labor and birth and early feeding of the baby. It is very important, and in order to reduce the risk of neonatal hypoglycemia. We should also tell them that baby can have like some medical problems initially, and how we are going to help them. So we need to tell them that person like baby doctor or the neonatologist is going to see them, like that. So all of these things are very important. Okay, so that's why you know it's very very important that they should not go for unplanned pregnancy. They should go for planned pregnancies.
Plan.
So, and we need to give them like very important, significant advice. Like, why it is important? It is very important because you don't want your patient to suffer. Why you don't want your patient to suffer? Because they are going to have so many complications. So it's very important to avoid an unplanned pregnancy. That is essential component of the diabetes education, which we need to provide them effectively. Then we have to explain them that what type of contraception they can take. Actually, if they don't have any vascular disease, then they can use all, and they don't have hypertension, then they can use all types of birth control. But otherwise, they can use this progesterone contraceptives, and they can also use oral contraceptives. Why they can use oral contraceptives? Because they fulfill the criteria. I will highlight this point for you. Okay, they can use oral contraceptive if they don't have the vascular disease. If they have vascular disease, then it will become contraindicated. And then we have to tell them that the risk to the baby, it will also depend upon the duration of the diabetes. Like if she has been having this diabetes for a longer period of time, then of course she's going to have more significant effects, like that. So OCPs they can use, but if they are hypertensive or they have vascular disease with it, they cannot use anything like that. Then they will have to take alternative things. And for how long they should be using contraception? Until they have attained a good glycemic control. That is the purpose of giving them contraception. So how we will know that they have achieved a good control? We will have to assess the hemoglobin A1C level. And then we will have to tell them that we will have to set the blood glucose targets, glucose monitoring, and medicines they will be used for treating the diabetes, including the insulin regimen for insulin treated diabetes and medicines for complications of diabetes. They will need to be reviewed before and during pregnancy. It's not one time affair. Pay attention to the word before and during pregnancy. And the extra time they are taking in managing the diabetes, it will mean that they are likely to have less complications during pregnancy like that. And everything you are telling them, you have to give them full information, give them patient information leaflet, and it should contain the important emergency contact numbers. Why? Because the general rule is that if a diabetic woman she becomes ill during pregnancy, then we should assume that it is because of the diabetes unless proven otherwise. Okay, that is the one.
Yeah.
So dietary supplements, these things are very important, and you need to give them specific information like that. So dietary recommendations, we have to tell them that they should get individual advice, and how much, if their BMI is more than the cutting edge is BMI should not be more than 27, because as you know at BMI 26 you will say that the woman is overweight, and after the BMI of 29 we will say that they are officially obese like that. Okay, so if their BMI is like 27 or more, we have to give them advice on losing weight, okay, in a healthy way. So, and we will tell them that it is better that if they will optimize their weight before becoming pregnant like that. And then to prevent the risk of neural tube defects, we need to tell them that take 5 milligram folic acid daily, 5 milligram, and you know that 5 milligram is not OTC, so you will have to give them a prescription for it. Okay? So give them folic acid so that they will keep taking it during pregnancy. Then it is very important to monitor the this preconception blood glucose and ketones in the preconception period. So we will say, so you are going to offer them monthly measurement of hemoglobin A1C in the diabetics who are planning pregnancy, and you need to tell them, you need to give them a glucometer also. Okay, you have to ensure that if they have it one before, that is well and good. If they don't have, then you need to give them one. So you need to give them if they are planning pregnancy, and then we should tell them that we need to intensify the blood glucose lowering therapy. Why? Because we want to have ideal blood sugar level before they become pregnant. Okay, and then how we are going to monitor them? We are going to tell them about a mix of fasting level and mixture of pre-meal and post-meal levels. So they will have to do fasting and then on after before and after all 3 meals. So total 7 times they will be checking their blood sugar level. So if the woman has type 1 diabetes, then you should know that they can decompensate very quickly during pregnancy. So we have to give them ketone testing strips, and we have to give them counsel them that how they will feel if they will develop this ketonemia, and if they become acutely unwell during pregnancy, then we should say that they are becoming sick because of the diabetes unless proven otherwise. So most of the time, this is very important, that any time they become unwell, we need to know that they have become so because of ketonemia or hyperglycemia or severe hypoglycemia. Anything can occur. So regarding the target blood glucose levels, that what should be the target blood glucose levels before pregnancy. Like I mentioned before, that we need to tell them that they need that normal capillary target glucose levels are like fasting plasma glucose level should be here, like between 5 to 7, okay, on waking up. Then a plasma glucose level of 4 to 7 before meals and at other times of the day. And then, these two levels are very important. 5 to 7 when she's getting up, and 4 to 7 before meals or at before meals at other times of the day like that. Okay, and we also need to tell them like their glycated hemoglobin level should be below 48 millimole or less than 6.5%. This info is important. Don't forget these numbers. This is 48 millimole and 6.5%. Okay, and it will not
Yeah.
cause like problematic hypoglycemia. So we need to tell them that if like their hemoglobin 1c level is below 48, then very less chance of having congenital abnormalities. Okay, but if the level is like 86 or before, then the chance is going to increase, and if the level is more than 10%, then we have to advise them against pregnancy. This 10%, sometimes in that question they will give you percentage, sometimes they will give you the level. Okay, so you should remember both things.
Sorry, Dr.
56
Aisha, could you go back to the target blood glucose level?
Yeah, 5 and 7, and yeah, here it is. Fasting plasma glucose level should be 5 to 7 millimoles per liter on waking up. Okay, and then plasma glucose level of 4 to 7 millimoles per liter before meals and at other times of the day. Okay,
This is for anyone who is
diabetic.
in insulin or metformin.
Yeah,
Okay.
that is the point. Who is already on therapy, right? That is the point. So that is one thing, and then safety of medicine for diabetes. So obviously they will like to know that is the drug safe. So we have to tell them that most of the drugs, they are totally safe, and women who have diabetes, they may use metformin as an adjunct or alternative to the insulin in the preconception period and during pregnancy. When the likely benefits from improved glucose, they will outweigh the potential harm. Metformin is safe, but all other oral blood glucose lowering drugs, they should be like discontinued, okay, because they have potential for harm like that. Only metformin is safe. They can use metformin, okay, and all other blood glucose lowering drugs, they should be discontinued, and they should be, so if you are discontinuing, then you should be substituting it with something. Okay, so we are going to substitute with insulin. That is one thing, okay, because insulin is safer, safer thing, so it doesn't cross the placenta, so not likely to cause any harm. It is not known to cause any harm in the animal studies like that. Then you should know that available medical evidence shows that rapid acting insulin analogs like aspart and lispro, these are long acting, they adversely affect the it is known that they do not affect adversely the pregnancy or health of the fetus or newborn. So aspart and lispro, just remember these are rapid acting insulin analogs. Which one? Don't forget in the exam. Sometimes they will ask you that this is long acting or short acting. Okay, so this is the rapid acting insulin analog, aspart, lispro. So if they give you like the graphs, so the short acting, like the peak action is reached within minutes, then you have to say that this curve is because of the aspart or lispro. Okay, that is one thing. So aspart and lispro are very safe in pregnancy and they do not cause any harm. Then isoflurane insulin, that is the first choice of the long-acting insulin. Okay. Which one? Isoflurane insulin is the long-acting, and this is known to be safe. And we should consider continuing treatment with long-acting insulin analogs like the insulin detamers or insulin Dargen in women who have diabetes, which have established blood glucose controls before pregnancy. So it is well controlled, so you can use like Detamir and Glargine also can be used. Mostly they will not ask you this question, but they will ask you this one, like short acting is beneficial or not, like that. Okay. Then, as we mentioned before, that if someone is like hypertensive, then she will be on some treatment. Why she will be hypertensive in the diabetes? Because of the microvascular changes like that. Okay. So for such patients, what we have to do is angiotensin converting enzyme inhibitors and angiotensin 2 receptor antagonists, they should be discontinued before pregnancy, because in the animal studies they have been known to cause the problems, and then like there can be rupture of the tendons, there can be like anomalies in the kidney, in the renal system. Okay, but you cannot,
Yeah.
but your patient needs treatment, so you need to give them safer options. Like if they don't have asthma, they can start this beta blocker. If they are allergic to beta blockers, then maybe they can go on like methyl dopa, because hydralazine we don't give for the in such scenarios, and we don't give nifedipine also in view of the this rapid spikes in the action, followed by like reflex tachycardia can be there, hypotension can be there, okay.
Yeah.
And if they need statins, they should also be discontinued. Statins should be discontinued before pregnancy or as soon as the pregnancy is confirmed. So we are not going to give them statins, and we are not going to give them angiotensin converting enzyme inhibitors or angiotensin 2 receptor blockers. So ARBs and ACE1s, they are contraindicated during pregnancy, okay. And then we have to give them more information, and we have to explain them that pre-conception blood glucose control is very beneficial. It is going to decrease their complications, and they should have a full review, and this is very important to make their pregnancy safe for them, okay. That is one thing. So pre-conception counsel should be given, and we have to tell them on each and every visit that they should not stop taking the drug unless their blood sugar level is well controlled, and then they can plan their pregnancy safely. Then they have to undergo certain checks. Which checks? Like retinal assessment should be done before pregnancy, very important. So they should go to the ophthalmologist, and you will offer them, if they have not been having this retinal assessment in the preceding 6 months. If they didn't go to the doctor in the last 6 months, then we will have. Because why they will go in the last 6 months? Because usually, these patients have to go to the ophthalmologist every year. So if they didn't see
Yes.
the ophthalmologist in the last year, then we can check them. We can send them.
Can
And
send them between.
yeah, to see them, okay. But if they had their last checkup like within last 6 months, then it means they are fine. And which drug? This one also I've seen in the SBA. They will need tropicamide, which is like a dilator, mydriasis. It will cause dilatation, so that the doctor will be able to see the condition of the retinal blood vessel. So it is safe in pregnancy, okay, no harmful effect. So that is one thing, okay. And the second thing is, we have to tell them that they should defer optimization of the blood glucose control until after they had retinal assessment and treatment. So they should defer the pregnancy for some time, okay. And this is important for them, because they should not have like any complications. So the women with diabetes who are planning to become pregnancy, you should ask to defer rapid optimization of the blood glucose control until after retinal assessment and treatment has been completed. Why it is so? Because the problem is that unfortunately, when you are going to trying to complete the achieve good blood sugar control, then proliferation of retinal blood vessels, that will be very fast, so it will worsen their existing condition. Then they will need renal assessment. Why renal assessment? Because so that they should be able to tolerate pregnancy, and we have to do renal assessment, and we also have to see that they are having this albuminuria or not. So if they are having albuminuria, it is going to worsen during pregnancy, so they should continue taking their treatment unless they have been seen by someone else, by the nephrologist, and then nephrologist has given them a clear chit, and then they can go and start a pregnancy. So here we have certain purposes. What are they? Serum creatinine is abnormal, like it is 120 micromole per liter or more, or the urinary albumin creatinine ratio is greater than 30, or
30. Yeah.
the estimated glomerular filtration rate is less than 45 ml per minute. Then we have to refer them to the nephrologist, and it should be considered before discontinuing the contraception. So 3 conditions.
Yes.
Serum creatinine, if it is 120 or more. Then urinary albumin creatinine ratio. is greater than 30, or the estimated glomerular filtration rate is less than 45. Okay? These three things should be on your fingertips like that.
Yeah.
120 ml and the ratio of the albumin creatinine greater than 30, and estimated glomerular filtration rate of is less than 45 milliliters per minute. So that's why you have to consider it, because it is very, very important like that. Okay, so let's talk about gestational diabetes mellitus, because I told you that this is the most common type of diabetes. And it is surprising that
Yeah.
we are talking about the type 1, type 2 all the time, but we should know that GDM is the most common type of diabetes. Okay, very important for us to know. So the GDM, to diagnose GDM, now the question is that which test you will carry out. We carry out two types of tests: screening tests and diagnostic tests. Among the screening test, remember, in the pregnancy you are going to carry out 75-gram oral glucose tolerance test. Okay, so GDM, it can be controlled with changes in diet and exercise, and then we know that if they are not responding to changes in the way in the diet and with the diet and exercise, then after 1 week we will have to reassess them, and then we will have to give them blood glucose lowering agents or insulin depending upon their case. So if gestational diabetes is not detected and controlled, then there is a small risk of serious adverse birth complications such as shoulder dystocia. And women with GDM, they will need more monitoring and may need more intervention during pregnancy and labor. That's why you have to do the proper risk assessment. So then you should know who is going to develop these complications. You know that for such people we have to screen them, right? So now the question is
Yeah.
that who should be screened? So there is a specific criteria. If the BMI is more than 30, then previous macrosomic baby weighing 4.5 kg or more, previous GDM, then family history of diabetes, like in the first degree relatives who had diabetes, then an ethnicity with a high prevalence of diabetes, like people from Gulf, Africans, and Asians. Okay, so I will repeat for you. We will have to check them at the time of booking appointment. Don't check every week. We will check for GDM if the woman has like there are different conditions that you should test for GDM. Who is that one? Okay. We will test for GDM if the BMI is above 30, previous macrosomic baby weighing 4.5 kg or more, previous GDM, family history of diabetes, and specific ethnicity. Okay. So then
Yeah.
we also have to give them guidance. What guidance should be given? We need to tell them that for the diabetic, for the GDM, we don't have to use fasting plasma glucose, random blood sugar level. We don't have to do that. Okay. So we should check like hemoglobin A1C level or urinalysis for the risk of developing GDM. So don't use certain things. I will show you that we should not be using certain things. Which things should not be used? It will lead to that if it is
So,
diagnosed.
so for a patient who has a previous history of diabetes,
Yeah,
GDM, I mean,
okay.
we don't use the GTG test.
We will come to that in a minute. Then we will have to test them at the time of appointment. Okay, but this is for the generally, like a person is coming to you, so we don't use fasting plasma glucose, random blood glucose, hemoglobin A1C, glucose challenge test, or urinalysis for glucose to assess risk of developing GDM. Okay, glycosuria, which is detected by routine antenatal testing, that can be, then we will have to do further testing. We should know that glycosuria of 2 plus or above on one occasion or of 1 plus or above on two occasions, they are, or more occasions, they are detected by reagent strips. In the antenatal care, it may indicate that patient has undiagnosed the GDM, gestational diabetes. Okay, then if you find, so I mean, you don't have to use these as the screening test. Okay, How you will know
For
that if
every
the
patient,
yeah
unless they have a risk.
yeah unless you are finding a glycosuria of 2 plus ones or 1 plus on 2 or more opinions. Okay, so this is the screening test like that. Okay, after that this is just showing you that there is risk factor. So then you are going to test them for GDM with the help of a 2-hour 75-gram oral glucose tolerance test for gestation diabetes in the women with the risk factor, not in everyone, in the women who has risk factors. Okay, and then 75 grams oral glucose tolerance test. And how we will diagnose? We will diagnose GDM if the woman has either a fasting plasma glucose level of 5.6 millimoles per liter or above, or a 2-hour plasma glucose level of 7.8 millimoles per liter or above. Then we need to offer women with diagnosis of GDM a review with the joint diabetes and antenatal clinic within 1 week, and start with 2-week trial of diet and exercise if fasting level is less than 7. Then when are we going to start the treatment? So we are going to start within 1 week. You need to arrange review, and within 2 weeks, like 2 weeks, we are going to give them trial for diet and exercise, and if the blood glucose level is controlled, well and good. If it is not controlled, then we will have to do something else, like we will have to go for other things like that. Like what we will do, we will have to go for full review. Then regarding the testing, I wanted to tell you another thing, that if the woman has, like we talked about this one, just 1 second, we said that we are going to, if there is glycosuria, then we are going to test them. But if the woman, like she has history of GDM in the previous pregnancy, so we will offer them early self-monitoring of blood glucose level. This is if the woman has like history of GDM before. Okay, so then the testing will be different. Also, SP, what will you do? We can do early self-monitoring of blood glucose level, or we can offer a 75-gram 2-hour OGTT as soon as possible after booking. So it can be like in the first trimester, or it can be in the second trimester. Anytime she's coming to you, we are going to screen her. And how we are going to screen her? At the time of booking, when she has history of GDM in the previous pregnancy, and then if that turns out to be high, then we need to start treatment. But if that turns out to be normal, then we are going to offer a second testing at 24 to 28 weeks. Okay, that is the point. So if the levels in the first test are normal, so we will offer, when they have the risk factors, then we are going to offer them 75-gram 2-hour OGTT at 24 to 28 weeks. We can diagnose GDM if the woman has either fasting plasma glucose level of 5.6 millimoles per liter or above, or she has a 2-hour plasma glucose level of 7.8 millimoles per liter or above. These two levels are important for us. Okay, fasting 5.6 or 2-hour plasma glucose level of 7.8 millimoles per liter or above. So that is important for you. So then how we are going to start treatment? For 1 week, we are going to offer them, within 1 week, we have to offer them a review. Okay. And after 1 week, if they are not improving, then within 2 weeks, we need to start the treatment for them. So the treatment, when we are going to start, what is the indication? Failed diet and exercise. Like glucose readings, the fasting was more than 7. So we need to offer immediate insulin and maybe plus minus metformin. Okay. If the fasting level is between 6 to 6.9, then we need to consider immediate glucose, insulin, or plus minus metformin if macrosomia or polyhydramnion develops. This information is very vital for you. Why? Because if anything happens at any time, you need to take action. Okay. Like the fasting is 6 to 6.9, consider immediate insulin plus metformin if you are going to see plus minus metformin at this level, because usually the fasting is more than 7, no other complication is there, we will start insulin and plus minus metformin. Now the second scenario is fasting is between 6 to 6.9, but either the baby is large or there is polyhydramnios. Polyhydramnia is also going to develop if there is going to be some uncontrolled blood sugar level. That is the point. Okay. So we need to tell the woman that how she will need start the therapy and how we are going to help her like that. And then we have to tell them that these women, they will exercise regularly when they can do 30 minutes after taking the food, like that. Okay. And if the level is like 7, you know that we are giving them a less than 7 blood glucose level, give them a chance for, you know, here it is. Okay. Fasting is less than 7, 2 weeks trial of diet and exercise. So if nothing happens, then within 1 to 2 weeks, nothing is occurring, then we are going to offer them metformin. Okay, metformin is the first line for the GDM. But before starting the treatment, we need to find that how this person is doing. So if the level is less than 7, initially we can start with metformin, and we should give metformin for 1 to 2 weeks. If after taking metformin for 1 to 2 weeks she is not improving, then at that time you will have to introduce, then you will have to
Insulin.
introduce the insulin also, because people, they don't feel comfortable, but we need to tell them that insulin is safe during pregnancy, so they will not have any problems like that. So then we should know, sometimes they will ask you that, is it licensed? Like metformin is licensed? No, it is not licensed for this purpose. That's why we have to give information. This should be given by the diabetologist only, like that. And for women with GDM, like what we have to do, like the hemoglobin, this glycated level of hemoglobin is more than 7. So again, diet and exercise, and but they will have to start the treatment also, like that. So if the failure of the blood control with anything, then we have to give them full-fledged treatment and review them. Okay. So then we should consider, this is also like MCQ. If metformin fails or not tolerated and patient has refused insulin, then you can give them glibenclamide. Okay. But
Okay.
glibenclamide is given only if the patient's blood sugar level is uncontrolled and she didn't accept metformin because of the side effects. Another condition can be like she has some underlying renal disorder. So she has renal disorder, so she can develop lactic acidosis very quickly. Okay. So that's why, you know, like metformin is not accepted or it is contraindicated and the patient has refused insulin. Then of course you need to give her something to control her condition, right? So that is the only situation where you can give them glibenclamide. That is one thing. Okay.
Okay.
So so when you are giving therapy, there is a purpose for it, right? So what are the glucose targets in pregnancy? Fasting level should be less than 5.3, and 1 hour level it should be less than 7.8 millimoles per liter, or 2 hours it should be less than 6.4 millimoles per liter. That is very
Sorry,
important. Okay?
can it's the target here is different than the previous target which you showed me. Was
Yeah,
that just in general the type 1
yeah,
diabetes or?
yeah. That was general. That was general.
Okay.
In other, I remember these two levels were given, but you should know that these are the, actually, you know, the levels are similar. Here we have added this 2 hour, because after 2 hours the glucose level should drop, right?
Yeah.
When the patient has taken food, then after that the blood glucose level should increase, right? But after that it should return to normal, like that. That is the point. Okay. So fasting
So,
less
so
than
sorry,
5.3.
could you remind me with the previous levels on
See
that
here,
the
these were the fasting, and the, you know,
Mhm.
these were the actual levels, right? But these are the expected levels. These are our targets, right? You
Mhm.
get my point? These are the
Yeah,
targets which we want to
target.
achieve, and this is the, like, that is the fiction, right? But this is fact, that
Mhm.
your patient has these levels, right? These levels are
Yes.
deranged, right? These levels are
Mhm.
not normal,
Yes.
these are deranged. Now we are doing some
Yeah.
intervention because we want to control the blood sugar levels, isn't it so? Right? So
Yes. Yeah.
if you are going to some destination, you have a target that where you are heading, right? That you want to go to London or you want to go to like Manchester, so you will be taking different routes, different roads, right? So our target is to achieve fasting. Our patient to begin with, his blood glucose fasting level is more than 7, but we are aspiring, we are hoping to get a fasting level less than 5.3, and 1 hour postprandial
Mhm.
less than 7.8, and 2 hours postprandial less than 6.4. Okay. So
Yes.
then regarding this hemoglobin A1C, Meyer at diagnosis for GDM, you should check this glycated hemoglobin level at the time of diagnosis of GDM, and why we should check that, while we have said that we should not be doing screening for GDM. Remember, very important point. We are not measuring this glycated hemoglobin level to screen for the GDM. For that we used glucosuria. Remember?
Yes, yeah.
Now you have a patient where you have already established a diagnosis of GDM,
GDM.
right? So in this patient, you want to see that is she having any pre-existing type 2 diabetes, because the glycated hemoglobin level is going to tell you that what was the level over a period of preceding last 3 months, right?
3 months,
Very
yes.
specific, okay? So we are going to measure it at the time of diagnosis of GDM to check for type 2 diabetes. So increased risk for hemoglobin A1C level more than 48 millimoles per liter or more than 6.5, then the risk of type 2 diabetes will increase, right? And keeping it
Yes.
less than 48 millimoles per mole, this is in the first trimester, it will reduce congenital abnormalities. And again, if the glycated hemoglobin is more than 86, then we have to advise the patient against pregnancy. So if this patient has GDM, right? So once she has been diagnosed with GDM, you need to check her like a regular patient, and you are going to get her reviewed and do everything for her like you would do for other people. And you need to tell your patient a few things, like she can develop hypoglycemia at any time, and she needs to keep some dextrose straps with the glucose containing drugs all the time, like that, okay? Because why we are telling this all to the patient, once the patient starts taking insulin, then you should know that patient's blood sugar level can drop or rise very quickly, right? And another thing is that when you are giving the insulin, we have to be ensured that it should avoid cutaneous amyloidosis if your patient has that. Okay, if the patient has amyloidosis, then we have to ensure that we are giving in the subcutaneous tissue like that. Okay, rapid acting insulin analog like Aspart and Lespro, these are like first priority, right? And they have advantage over soluble human insulin during pregnancy. These are insulin analogs. You know, this Aspart and Lispro, these are not actual insulins, these are insulin analogs. But they have advantages over soluble insulin or Humulin during pregnancy. Then we have to tell the patient that when we are using insulin, then these patients are at the risk of having hypoglycemia, especially in the first trimester. So patient and the family member, they should be concerned about the use of glucose tabs, dextrose tabs, and the glucose containing drinks. And then we have to give them very important question in the exam also. Your patient has become hypoglycemic. She's on insulin. Now she has become hypoglycemic. So what treatment you are going to give them? So you will not give them sugary drinks at that time, okay? You will give them glucagon. Very important point to remember. You are going to give them glucagon. Why glucagon? Because the glucagon is diabetogenic. It is going to increase the blood sugar level immediately like that. Okay, that is very important thing. So for the glucagon, you are going to give them whenever your patient will develop hypoglycemia. Usually, what is the dose of glucagon? 1 milligram per kg body weight. Okay, it is not written here, but you should know that the level of glucagon should be, you need to think 1 milligram per kg body weight. Okay, you need to give this much glucagon. Exam question, that patient is becoming hypoglycemic. So what will you give? Many students, they will tell that we can give them like glucose sugary drinks. Not sugary drinks, you will have to give them glucagon. That is the
Okay.
point. Okay?
Yeah.
So then how often you are going to see your patients? You need to see your patients you will have to do the growth scans. How often? at 28 weeks, then at 32 weeks and 36 weeks. And patients with any medical disorder of pregnancy, you need to see them every 1 to 2 weeks. Why? To check their compliance to the treatment and see that they're not developing any serious complication like that. Then very important for you to remember timing of birth. Timing of birth is very, very important. They are always asking about this. So timing of birth, because you are going to get questions around it. If the patient has uncomplicated GDM, then delivery no later than 40 plus 6 weeks. So the maximum time you can give to this patient is 40 weeks and 6 days, right? If the patient has complicated GDM means like he is taking insulin because she's taking any type of therapy, but mostly if she's taking like insulin, then her risk profile is going to be the same as that of the type 1 or type 2 diabetic woman, right? So complicated GDM, delivery prior to 40 weeks plus 6 weeks plus 6 days, okay? If she's having uncomplicated type 1 or type 2 diabetes, then you should deliver such patients between 37 to 38 plus 6 weeks. If she is having complicated type 1 or type 2 diabetes, then you have to consider delivery before 37 weeks. For sure, you're going to get like 2 questions from here, okay? This information is very simple, but students, they forget it during exam. All of these notes are available for, they are available on your web page. Don't worry about that, okay? So
Okay.
then another question is, who can use insulin pumps? Insulin pumps, they are becoming more and more popular. Why? Because they are not dependent upon the user, and then they are testing, they are providing better control. Why? Because they have sensors, so they will check that what is the blood glucose level right now, and then accordingly they are going to dispense the dose of insulin into the systems. So 6% of the type 1 diabetics, they will use pumps overall. And 20% of the pregnant women with pre-existing diabetes, they are going to use the insulin pumps. And then these pumps, they contain fast-acting insulin only, and their basal rates are lower in the patients between 8 to 16 weeks. And if this pump, the dose is not reduced, then what will happen? Patient is at risk of developing hypoglycemia. And then the dose through this pump has to be increased after 16 weeks of pregnancy. Why it is so? Why we are increasing the dose after like 15 weeks, 16 weeks? Because the blood glucose, it will become hard and hard to decrease the blood glucose level. Why? Because of the human placental lactogen, which is coming from the placenta. That is the point, okay? So that's why the control is very important like that, okay? So
Okay.
we have given, so that's all you need to know about the gestational diabetes mellitus, which is the most common type of the normal glucose control during pregnancy, like that. So any question, any problem for it?
No, it's all clear. Is it on the website? This
Yeah. Everything
okay.
is on your web page. When you will go to the maternal medicine, you are going to find it there, okay, like that.
Okay.
So the control can be like control of the blood sugar, it can be like problematic. So then the question arises that when we should check the ketones level. So regarding the ketones level, you should know that you should check the ketones level to the pregnant women with type 1 diabetes, okay? We have to give them the strips, and we have to give them the glucometer if they are having like type 1 diabetes, okay? Because they can become unwell anytime like that. Because the highest risk of developing diabetic ketoacidosis in that with type 1 diabetes, okay? And if the woman has type 2 diabetes or she has GDM, then we have to tell them that they should seek advice immediately if they become hyperglycemic or they become unwell. So we have to keep this possibility that the chance of diabetic ketoacidosis is low with the GDM and the type 2, but it is not like zero. So if any woman with the diabetes, she becomes unwell during pregnancy, suddenly she becomes unwell. So for this patient, we need to check her ketones level immediately, okay? And you have to assume the diagnosis of diabetic ketoacidosis immediately with unless proven otherwise. So if the patient develops diabetic ketoacidosis, she needs care at the level 2 critical care. Level 2 critical care where she doesn't need any ventilation. Okay? Anytime your patient needs ventilator, then she is already in critical stage. She will have to go to the level 3. So anyone who doesn't need a ventilator, they are still in the level 2 care. Okay? So that was
Yeah.
all about the previous things. So when they need retinal assessment during pregnancy. So like we said before, that if she has been seen in the last 6 months for the annual checkup, then we don't have to offer her any testing, okay? But if she was not seen before, then we need to send her for the retinal testing. How they will do? They will create mydriasis, that is dilatation of the pupil, by giving them topicamide, okay? It can be done following their first antenatal appointment, because this is someone who didn't come before. So, and this is the one, and if they had the retinal assessment in the last 3 months, that's fine. But if it was not done, then we need to do it. And then we are going to review them again at 28 weeks. And if any diabetic retinopathy is present at the time of booking, then we will have to offer additional retinal assessment at 16 to 20 weeks. So now 3 times, right? If it was done before
Yeah.
3 times, that is good. If it was not done, then send this patient now, after the diagnosis of pregnancy, send her for the assessment. Then the second
So
thing
if
is,
yeah.
and
So if
then
it was done in the last 3 months, we repeat 28 weeks. If it was done 6 months ago, then we need to repeat it between 16 and 20 weeks. Yeah.
if it was done and nothing was found, then carry out the second exam at 28 weeks, okay? But now a patient came to you, she was not seen in the last 3 months, so you asked her that you sent her for the review and she has developed retinopathy. Or even she was seen 3 months ago and that she was diagnosed to have retinopathy at that time. Then you need to review this retinal examination at 16 to 20 weeks. Okay, if somebody has condition before pregnancy or she is diagnosed with the condition during pregnancy, then we have to offer additional review. This is additional one. Okay, additional retinal
Yes.
assessment at 16 to 20 weeks. That is the point. Okay. Then the next point. So this point is clear.
Yes, it is clear. Yeah.
Okay, and then so this patient will have a third assessment. Third assessment when? At 28 weeks. That is the point. So the diabetic retinopathy, it should be considered a contraindication to rapid control of the blood sugar level during pregnancy. Okay, important point. All of these are important SVAs. Okay, so diabetic retinopathy should not be diabetic retinopathy should not be considered a contraindication. Important points. I will highlight this one. It should not be considered an contraindication to rapid optimization of the blood glucose control. Why? Because the retinal problems we can deal with them, right? But the other problems, no. It is going to be like increase like that. Okay? Other problems are main problems, so we have to be careful about it. We have to ensure that women who have pre-proliferated diabetic retinopathy or any form of referable retinopathy diagnosed during pregnancy, she will have ophthalmological follow-up for at least 6 months after birth of baby. Okay? So she will need, the one who has diabetic retinopathy, she will need another ophthalmological follow-up for at least 6 months after the birth of baby. What is the risk in the diabetics? They can have if the retinopathy is there, it can result in like sudden blindness, right? It can be detached, there can be retinal detachment, okay? So we will have to offer them photocoagulation, something. So laser coagulation. So that's why, she will need review unless the condition has gone back to the normal. And then another important point, the diabetic retinopathy, it should not be considered a contraindication to the vaginal birth. So if the renal, so that's why it is very, very important that the retinopathy, it should not be considered a contraindication to vaginal birth. It is not going to be affected like in any way. Okay, that is one thing. So it is not a contraindication for the vaginal birth. That is the point. So I said that we are going to carry out 3 types of assessment. Okay, like retinal assessment, right?
So
Now,
this statement, diabetic retinopathy should not be considered a contraindication for vaginal delivery.
yeah, that is the point. Okay, so
Yeah.
that is the point. It's not contraindication for anything. So you need to optimize good blood sugar control, and then patient can go for vaginal birth unless unless there is contraindication to normal delivery. That is the point. Is it clear?
Yes, and there is no contraindication to optimize the sugar level as well
Yeah.
if she has retinopathy. Because in a previous statement, there was like advised women with diabetes who are planning pregnancy to defer rapid optimization of blood glucose control until or after they have had retinal assessment.
Yeah. Now, you know why this 3-month thing is coming and 6-month thing is coming. Now we are talking about someone pre-pregnancy care of somebody with type 1 diabetes. Before we talk about everything and the treatment, it was about someone like, and I will show you, like when we were talking about this wall, we were talking about GDM. Okay, and right now we are talking about the retinal and the renal assessment of the one with the type 1 diabetes. Okay, that is the point.
Okay.
So renal assessment of the person with the type 1 diabetes. So we have to tell them that we should offer, like we have done this retinal assessment during pregnancy, she is fine. When we are going to revise everything, so we need to offer the renal assessment. Then it should be offered to the person who has type 1, to the lady who has type 1 diabetes. So we will arrange renal assessment at first contact during pregnancy for the women with pre-existing diabetes if they have not had one examination in the last 3 months, right? In the last 3 months, then nothing was done, then we are going to offer them review. For the review, we have to consider them, referring them. This is the review. So if we are finding that the serum creatinine level is 120 micrograms micromole serum, this one, or the urine albumin creatinine ratio is greater than 30, or total protein excretion exceeds 5 grams per day. Now these 3 conditions, serum creatinine is abnormal like 120 or more, and albumin creatinine ratio is greater than 30, or the total protein excretion exceeds 0.5 milligrams per day, then we will say that this patient is at risk of having some renal disaster. So she should go to the nephrologist, and they are going to see the efferent glomerular filtration rate that is not used during pregnancy. Here we didn't mention why the patient is pregnant, right? And before we said that if those points, that serum creatinine less than 120, albumin creatinine ratio less than 30, and glomerular filtration rate less than 45.
45, yeah.
Right? So that was in the pre-pregnancy period, okay? But now we are talking about someone who is already pregnant, right? So that's why we will have to see these 3 things. Here the additional point is total protein excretion is exceeding 0.5 grams per day. It's not 5 grams per day. 5 gram, your patient is already in renal failure, or she is like having some renal pathology, and she will have hypoalbuminemia. So less than, pay attention to this one. This is 0.5 grams per day, okay? It's not 5 grams per day. Then refer to the nephrologist, it should be considered. And if proteinuria is above 5 grams per day, proteinuria more than 5 grams per day, or albumin, proteinine, and creatinine ratio is greater than 220 milligrams per deciliter per millimole, then we should consider what? We should consider thromboprophylaxis. Why? Because this patient is now at a higher risk of developing complications. So we have to offer them thromboprophylaxis. That is the point, okay? And regarding antiplatelet agents, you should know that we can give them safely. What we can give them? We can give them aspirin safely, so no problem with that. So we will have to give them antiplatelet agent, and the agent of choice is going to be aspirin. Okay, so this is an indication for aspirin therapy. That is the point. So then, what else should be done? So we have to offer them detailed review at 20 weeks. What are we going to see in the detailed review, ultrasound review? We are going to detect the antenatal congenital malformations. So we need to offer them a review. So like all patients, we are going to see everything, and we are going to look for them also 4 chambers, 2 outflow tracts, and 3 vessels at 20 weeks of gestation. That is important. Why we are concerned? Because cardiac defects are the most common defects during pregnancy. So whenever you are talking about the medical complications of pregnancy, maternal medicine, you are actually talking about 2 things: how you are going to monitor the baby and how you are going to monitor the mother. Okay, so how we are going to monitor fetal growth and well-being. So we are going to offer them assessment of fetal growth and amniotic fluid volume every 4 weeks. So these are the growth scans, right? From 28 weeks to 36 weeks. How they are different from the PET scans? In PET we are carrying out Dopplers, and here we are not carrying out any Dopplers. But if you detect that the baby is small in size for gestational age, or small in size, or the patient is becoming hypertensive, then this patient will need Dopplers also. So depends upon the condition. As if the patient doesn't have small for gestational age baby, or patient doesn't have any renal compromise at this time, then you don't have to do the growth scans. That is the point. Okay.
So here are we not okay? Yeah. Got
but
you.
We are offering everything every 4 weeks, from 28 weeks to 36 weeks. So regarding the routine monitoring of the fetal well-being before 38 weeks is not recommended. Okay, routine monitoring before 38 weeks is not recommended. Why? Because an unnecessary stress on the patient like that, unless there is a risk of fetal growth restriction. There is a risk of fetal growth, then you are going to do the Dopplers. Okay, before that you don't have to do anything, right? Complication is there, carry out the Dopplers. Nothing is there, you don't have to do anything. And then you have to see that every patient will need these are just recommendations, right? But if the patient's condition vary, then you will have to modify your own plan also. Okay, so don't fix yourself to any routine. So because each patient is going to be different. In the exam, read the scenario very well, identify the risk of that patient, in which category she falls, and then counsel her about the treatment accordingly. So you are going to provide individualized approach to monitoring fetal growth and well-being for women with diabetes and risk of fetal growth restriction. Like baby can have like macrovascular disease, or baby can have like the mother has macrovascular disease, or she has nephropathy. These are indications for the fetal Dopplers. Why? Because baby is at risk of growth restriction. Then what should be done for the antenatal care of women with the diabetes? Okay, how they should go into the organization. Very important. In the exam, they are going to ask you multiple questions around diabetes, so you should know that these women, they need to be seen by the multidisciplinary team. How frequently you are going to see them? You have to offer them assessment every 1 to 2 weeks throughout pregnancy. See this one? Before we used to say that every 4 weeks, but then it was changed 5 years ago that we need to see them every 1 to 2 weeks in the joint clinic. That is one thing. And then we have to tell them specifically that how many times they should come here and how often they will need this care. So content of each meeting and things, it can be described easily, like ideally by 10 weeks she should have been seen by everyone, information should have been provided to her, and including the dietary, even she's already known to have this diabetes, still we need to tell her that she will need assessment frequently, and she will also benefit from the dietary advice. So what will we have to do for her? So there is a timetable for the antenatal appointments, like we will offer her. So here it is like that. So this patient, we have to that she should come every 1 to 2 weeks throughout the pregnancy for all, not type 1, type 2, all women with diabetes. We need to measure glycated hemoglobin level for women with pre-existing diabetes to determine the level of risk for the pregnancy. We need to offer self-monitoring of blood glucose or 75 gram 2-hour OGTT as soon as possible for women with a history of GDM who book in the first trimester. So if a woman, she developed this GDM in previous pregnancy, that is the first visit, we are going to offer them assessment at the time of booking, like that. Okay. So we need to confirm the patient has come to you. So we need to confirm viability of pregnancy and gestational age, like all other pregnancies, at 7 to 9 weeks. Then at 16 weeks, we should offer retinal assessment at 16 to 20 weeks to the women with pre-existing diabetes, and if diabetic retinopathy was present, then their first antenatal visit. We will offer self-monitoring of the blood glucose or a 75 grams 2-hour OGTT as soon as possible for women with a history of GDM who booked in the second trimester. At 20 weeks, we need to offer an ultrasound scan for detecting fetal structural abnormalities, including examination of the fetal heart, like 4 chambers, outflow tracts like the pulmonary and the aortic outflow tracts, and the 3 vessels. 3 vessels should be there, and which 3 vessels should be there? Pulmonary, aorta, and the patent ductus arteriosus. All 3 should be there. At 28 weeks, we should offer ultrasound monitoring of fetal growth and amniotic fluid volume. We will offer retinal assessment to all women with pre-existing diabetes and women diagnosed with gestational diabetes as a result of routine antenatal testing. Then they will have to be tested at 24 to 28 weeks, and they will enter the care pathway. So we will have to do the growth scans, like at 32 weeks. So at what are we going to check here? The size of the fetus and the amniotic fluid volume. Okay. And then all nulliparous women, they should be offered all routine investigations. Usually they are carried out at 31 weeks in the routine antenatal care. Then at 34 weeks, no additional or different care for any person. We are going to offer them the same care like for anyone else, like that. Okay. So at 34 weeks, no difference. But at the appointment, when you are giving them appointment at 36 weeks, then you have to consider certain important factors. All of this information is taken from the NICE guideline. You will offer ultrasound monitoring for fetal growth and amniotic fluid volume, and you will provide information and advice at 36 weeks about the time, mode, and management of birth. What type of analgesia and anesthesia will be provided, and changes to the blood glucose lowering therapy during and after birth, and care of the baby after birth. Then advice on initiation of the breastfeeding and effect of breastfeeding on blood glucose control, and then you need to offer them contraception and follow-up. It is very important. Every word has been taken from the guideline. It is very important. Why do you want to give contraception? Because you don't want her to have an unplanned pregnancy. Then at 37 weeks to 38 weeks plus 6 days, what should be done? Here, offer induction of labor
Induction.
if the woman has not delivered, okay? Or
Yeah.
if cesarean delivery is indicated, we will offer them cesarean delivery. So if they have like type 1 or type 2 diabetes, otherwise we will await spontaneous labor. At 38 weeks, if the birth has not occurred, then we are going to offer tests of fetal well-being. At 39 weeks also, like sometimes, the patients, they will not be convinced that they need to deliver. So at 39 weeks, you will offer tests of fetal well-being, and you will advise women with uncomplicated GDM to give birth no later than 40 weeks and 6 days. Okay. In the diabetic, this is the last limit. Okay. 37 to 38 plus 6, and after 38 weeks, you are going to increase
Risk.
monitoring like that. Okay. That is the point.
Okay.
So, and you will offer them tests of fetal well-being. So the women with diabetes, they should be receiving routine antenatal care according to the schedule of the appointments, like the nice week guidance. And as you know, like the number of visits can be different for the nulliparous. Yeah, like the nulliparous, they are going to have like 9 visits, and the multiparous, they are going to have like 7 visits. And you will have to include the growth scans also like that. So women with diabetes, what they will do? They will receive routine care according to the schedule of the appointments like we have covered in the antenatal care, and including assignment appointments at 25 weeks for the nulliparous woman, and then at 34 weeks. These are the additional appointments. And then the nulliparous, they are going to have another visit at 31 weeks, but they will not ask you this thing. They will ask you about the total number of appointments. But in the diabetics, mostly they will ask you questions about the control of the blood glucose levels and like that. Okay, so this is important for you. Then that is so everything we said so far, it is about the term babies. Now what about the preterm? Because preterm is very important condition, right? So what should be done in the preterm? So the diabetes, it should not be considered, woman has diabetes, so it should not be considered a contraindication for tocolysis. Why? Because some of the drugs, they can, like we are giving them antenatal corticosteroids for fetal lung maturation. So steroids, they are diabetogenics, okay? So they can increase the blood glucose level. But we should know that we have to give them steroids, and they are not contraindicated in the diabetic women. Then beta mimetic medicines, usually we are not using, like Ritodrine, we are not using for tocolysis. But if you have no other option, like you don't have atosiban or some other thing, in that case we don't have to use beta mimetic medicines for tocolysis. Why? Because they are going to mask hypoglycemia. Your patient will become hypoglycemic and we will not even know about it. So that can be a concern like that. Okay. So so basically the point here is that you are going to treat preterm exactly you are going to treat any other preterm. Okay, so you don't have to don't have to worry about the diabetic one. Okay, that is the point. Why? Because we are going to give them steroids, right? And sometimes they can ask you another question, that the blood sugar level is highly uncontrolled, and you are planning to deliver that patient, and baby is premature, so you will give antenatal corticosteroids or not? You will say, yes, I will give. So you will have to choose among the options. And such questions are asked in the
exam.
Such questions are asked in the EMQs. That is the point.
Okay.
So what should be done? So we need to discuss, once the patient is coming for the very first antenatal appointment, at that time, ideally, you have to make a plan for the routine care, and also if the emergency will occur, the emergency situation will occur, then what will you do? Okay, so the plan should be already in place like that. That is important to consider, and so that even if you are not around, so anyone who is looking at the patient, they should know what exactly they should be doing like that. So the woman has like type 1 or type 2 diabetes, but she has no other complication. In the absence of any other complication, then what should be given? She can give birth, no other complication, to have an elective birth by induction of labor, we can offer it. Right? Or they can have the cesarean section, but the time will be between 37 and 38 plus 6 weeks of pregnancy. Again, repetition like that. Okay. Elective birth should be attempted before 37 weeks of pregnancy if the woman have type 1 or type 2 diabetes, and if there are metabolic or any other maternal or fetal complications. Obviously, if there is some complication, then you will have to deliver them before 37 weeks, because the diabetics, the biggest challenge can be unexplained IUFT. What do you think? Right? So in that case, any complication means early intervention. So deliver her before 37 weeks. Okay. So if they have GDM, then we have to tell them that the last chance they can avail is 40 weeks and 6 days. Okay, but not beyond that one. So we will offer elective birth by induced labor, or if like indicated by cesarean section, to the women who have not given birth by this time. So you will have to see if she is suitable for induction. Now I'm talking about the one with GDM. She is suitable for induction of labor, offer her induction of labor. She has some indication for cesarean section. Do cesarean section after 40 weeks and 6 days, and don't delay it from this point. Why? Because you are going to cause increasing the risk of patient. Why? Because she can develop fetal complications like that. And we know that if the patient has a previous cesarean section and now she is diabetic, so diabetes is not a contraindication for VBAC. So like any other regular patient, we are going to offer them VBAC. So the diabetic women who have like ultrasound diagnosis of macrosomic baby, we said macrosomic baby in the diabetic means that the birth weight, estimated birth weight is more than 4.5 kg. So what should be done for such patients? So for such patient, we will have to explain the risk and benefits of the vaginal birth, induction of labor, and cesarean section. Right? You have found a macrosomic baby. So in the macrosomic baby, you have to consider this is the baby is you have an ultrasound diagnosis of macrosomic baby. Okay, so you will counsel her about all available options. Why? Because you will not tell her that your baby is at risk so because of diabetes, because that will be totally wrong. Baby is not at risk unless the mother has some complicated problem, the blood sugar level is uncontrolled. So whichever mode of delivery is indicated, you are going to offer her that mode of delivery. Regarding anesthesia, like if the woman has the diabetes and the other comorbidities such as obesity or autonomic neuropathy, because these patients they can have neuropathies, right? So if she has autonomic neuropathy, then we will have to offer anesthetic assessment in the third trimester of pregnancy. And if she has general anesthesia for birth, then we need to monitor blood glucose level every 30 minutes for induction of general anesthesia until after the delivery of the baby is until after the baby is born and the woman is fully conscious. So how frequently you are going to test her? Every 30 minutes.
Every 30 minutes.
Every 30 minutes before the birth induction of general anesthesia, you will start at that time. And until after the every 30 minutes, right? Like she is taking this GA for 2 hours, so every 30 minutes we are going to test the blood sugar level unless the baby is born and mother is fully conscious. Why? Because we don't want her to go into coma and it is undiagnosed. That will be so bad like that. That is the point. Then the blood glucose control during labor and birth. So we need to monitor capillary plasma glucose level every hour. Remember, every hour. And we have to be sure that it will stay between 4 and 7 millimoles per liter. That is the one. 4 to 7 like that. Then IV dextrose and insulin infusion from the onset of the established labor for women with type 1 diabetes. So this is dextrose and insulin. Sometimes they will ask you very simple question. Which fluids you are going to take? You are taking the dextrose and insulin. Dextrose and insulin infusion. So sometimes they will ask you the question, you know, the other students, they will ask, why are you giving in dextrose? Why we are not giving normal saline? Because
she's type 1 diabetes.
Yeah, she is type 1 diabetes. We need to maintain the blood glucose level also, and this is the best way that in the presence of glucose, the potassium will enter the cells also like that. Okay, that is
so in type 1 we don't wait until until the BM is between above 7 or below 4. We just straight away start the.
We can in the type 1 we are going to start in sliding scale for them during labor. We are not giving them insulin. Why sliding scale? To maintain this good glycemic control over a period of certain number of hours. That is the underlying philosophy. Okay, and then we have to use IV dextrose and this infusion, dextrose and insulin infusion during labor and birth for the woman with diabetes whose capillary plasma level is not maintained between 4 and 7. The level is falling outside this range. Of course, if it is below, then we are not going to give anything because then we will not consider that there is any problem. But anyone whose blood glucose level during labor is more than 7 millimoles per liter, we need to give them sliding scale like that.
Yeah.
So how much insulin you are going to give? You know that we are giving that according to the level of the blood glucose. Like if she is at 140 millimoles per liter, 140, then you are starting with like 8 units, and with each increase in the units in the level, like 20 ml is this millimole, the number is increasing, and we are increasing like 4 units. Like at 140 you are giving them 8 units, 160 you will give them 12 units, and then you are going to increase accordingly, but it has to be titrated against you are getting the normal level, against the blood glucose level like that. Okay,
Yeah.
so
Usually the midwife here,
yeah,
she contacts the diabetic nurse whenever they're doing the sliding scale, and then
yeah,
according to the advice of the diabetic nurse, she
yes,
titrates.
because they are nurse specialists, right? So
Yes,
they are
yeah.
already working under the doctor. If they will have any problem, so they will take advice from the doctor, but generally the nurse practitioner, she can give good advice here. That's how the
Yes, yeah.
system works like that. Okay, so the neonatal care is equally important. So at the time of birth, the baby should be seen, birth should be attended by the neonatologist. Why? Because there can be like who should attend? The one,
Hypoglycemia.
yeah, the one who has advanced neonatal resuscitation skills. Babies of the women with the diabetes, they can stay with the mother unless they have some problem. Why they should stay with the mother? Because rooming in or kangaroo approach is very important because it is going to affect the bonding, right? So unless there are abnormal clinical signs, then the baby needs to be admitted to the ICU or special care. So what we have to do, we should carry out blood glucose monitoring at 2 to 4 hours after birth, and blood should be tested for polycythemia, hyperbilirubinemia, hypocalcemia, and hypomagnesemia for the babies with clinical signs. Hypomagnesemia will also present in the same manner as hypocalcemia. Like they will give you a baby where you are tapping at the cheek and it results in contraction of the facial muscles like that. Or they can give you somebody like baby is severely hypoglycemic and baby is unable to suckle also. So that baby is like very much tired, has hypoglycemia and has no energy to suck also. Okay, so the baby will be unable to suck. So suckling will be impaired like that. So then
Okay.
now the baby is born, so we need to carry out echocardiogram of the baby, like the mother, because the mother had diabetes, and we want to see that this baby doesn't have congenital heart disease or cardiomyopathy, and baby doesn't have any heart murmurs. So, and then the time of the examination and the clinical circumstances, they all are considered before carrying out any testing like that. So regarding the respiratory problems, so regarding the respiratory distress, if the baby can have respiratory distress, baby can have signs of cardiac decompensation if they have like congenital heart disease or cardiomyopathy, or baby can have signs of neonatal encephalopathy, signs of polycythemia. They are likely to need partial exchange transfusion, and these babies, they may need IV fluids. Baby may need tube feeding unless adequate support is available on the postnatal ward. So these are the indications that why the baby should go to the nursery. And if the baby has like jaundice requiring intense phototherapy and frequent monitoring of bilirubinemia. Here what are we scared of? Kernicterus. Like the if the bilirubin level is more than like 20 millimoles per liter, then the chance of kernicterus will increase and the baby can have convergence. So if the baby is born before 34 weeks of life or born between 34 and 36 weeks and indicated that patient has impaired feeding, then we need to take the baby to the nursery. That is the point. And if the babies are like they are in the community care, and they should not be transferred unless they are at least 24 hours old and not before like you are satisfied that baby is maintaining the blood glucose level and the baby is feeding well. Only then you can discharge these patients. So then for the baby we need to assess, like we said, that how often we are going to carry out the examination. Then we have to prevent the neonatal hypoglycemia. Why it is very important to prevent, and how do we assess for the neonatal hypoglycemia? These are important concepts. All of these are tested in the SPAs or in the EMQs. So all units, first of all, they should have a policy that how frequently they are going to test. The testing can be in the ward, and what we have to do, the testing should be carried out as soon as possible after birth. It means within 30 minutes and then at frequent intervals, which means like 30 minutes after birth, and then we are going to see them every 2 to 3 hours until feeding maintains pre-feed capillary plasma levels. Pre-feed, not after feed. After feed, that will be postprandial. Pre-feed capillary plasma level of plasma glucose level of 2 millimoles per liter. That is important. That is minimum. Could be higher, but the higher the better, but it should not be 2 or
Less than
if
2 point.
not less than 2. So if the capillary plasma levels are below 2 on 2 consecutive readings while you are giving maximum support for feeding, and there are abnormal clinical signs like there can be convulsions, so the baby is feeding poorly, then we will have to give them tube feeding, or you will have to offer them intravenous dextrose. Either give them IV fluid, or you will have to give them tube feeding. When the levels are less than 2 on 2 occasions, 2 consecutive readings are showing the blood sugar level of plasma capillary glucose level of less than 2, then it means baby is hypoglycemic. Then the blood glucose levels should be tested in the women with diabetes and they have clinical signs of hypoglycemia, and treat those who are hypoglycemic. How? With IV glucose as soon as possible. Okay? This is for the babies like that. Okay. If they were having like before, we have to give them the tube feeding or the IV dextrose. That is the point. So then what about the postnatal care? Postnatal care of the baby and also postnatal care of the mother. The mother is going to receive the routine care, and we have to monitor the blood glucose level, control, management of medicines, and the breastfeeding. So if they had like pre-existing diabetes and they were treated with insulin, then you will have to decrease the dose of insulin immediately. If you remember, during pregnancy, we have to increase the dose of what? We have to increase the dose of insulin by 25%. This is the pre-pregnancy dose plus 25% of that dose. Okay, for instance, if she was taking like 30 units and she becomes pregnant, so this patient will need 37.5 units. Okay, so 25% above the pre-pregnancy dose. It should be given. Okay, so that will be the adequate dose. So why? Because we want to have a good level of the blood sugar level to them. So that is one thing, and we have to explain to the woman who are taking insulin that they are, insulin and increased risk of hypoglycemia. Whenever the word insulin strikes your mind, the second thing which should come into your mind is increased risk of hypoglycemia. Okay, so you have to warn them that they can become hypoglycemic very quickly, and what they should do, like they should take a small meal or snack when they are feeding the babies or just before feeding the babies. Why? Because they can become hypoglycemic very quickly. And those who have been diagnosed with GDM, then they should stop blood glucose lowering therapy immediately after birth. The moment the baby has been detached, the placenta has been removed, they don't need this hypoglycemic therapy anymore. And the women who have like pre-existing type 2 diabetes who are breastfeeding, they can resume, like you give them insulin during pregnancy because blood sugar level was not controlled, right? Now they have given birth. So what we have to do, we have to stop insulin immediately, but the blood sugar level is high, so now we are going to give them metformin. Okay,
Yeah.
immediately after birth. Okay.
Mhm.
But other
Is it the
common,
same dose as prior to
yeah,
conception? They go
as prior to
back.
conception, right? And this dose will be like 25% lower. You know, certain other sulfonylureas the government allowed, like glibenclamide can be taken, other things can be taken. So different drugs are available which can be taken to control the blood sugar level of the mother. So ideally, these people, they should be reviewed by the diabetologist, by the physician, and they can give a plan, or they can write down in the plan even before the pregnancy, like that, even before the delivery. So now, what important information we need to give them? Like, they have delivered, so still we have to tell them about the contraception. So what type of contraception they will need, it will depend upon their individual circumstances, and like their previous experience with the contraception. So we can give them, like, if in the absence of vascular disease, we can give them COCPs, otherwise you will give them progesterone only methods, like that. Okay, so all of these should be provided, and we have to tell them that it is safe to continue breastfeeding. So what information we should give them after birth of the baby, that is for the follow-up. So we should tell them that they should go to their routine diabetes care arrangements, that what was their pre-existing plan. Go back to their original care. You know that we will refer them back to the community. And then we need to remind them it is very important to practice contraception and the need for preconception care when planning future pregnancy. So who is going to give her contraception now? Mostly GPs are giving, right? Unless the woman
Yeah.
has some serious issue. So the GP, you will refer them back to the GP. You don't have to write, but you have to mention that you need to take this contraceptive care. So the women who were diagnosed with GDM, so we need to tell them that they should go to the community care and their blood glucose should be tested to exclude persistent hyperglycemia, because now the baby is born, so the sugar level should drop. So if they are diagnosed with symptoms of the hyperglycemia, then we have to tell them that they need to go for further assessment, and they are at risk of having like the recurrence in the future pregnancies. And these women, they should be offered testing, diabetes testing, like glucose, or like the fasting plasma level should be tested when they are planning pregnancy in the pre-pregnancy period. Okay. And those women who are diagnosed with a GDM and whose blood glucose level has returned to the normal after birth, even then we are going to tell them lifestyle advice. Like, they should control their birth weight, and this is a lifestyle modification for the GDM people. Like, they should do this weight control, diet, and exercise. Okay, and we need to offer
Yeah.
them a fasting plasma. Pay attention to these words: fasting plasma at 6 to 13 weeks after birth of baby. This is the fasting plasma, okay? After the birth, to
I think
exclude
there is
diabetes.
a question on that. Yeah.
Yeah. And then, if they have it for the practical reasons, it might take place at the 6 weeks postnatal check. But if the fasting plasma level has not been performed before 13 weeks, then we will have to offer fasting plasma glucose test. Again, you can offer fasting plasma glucose test, or you can offer them glycated hemoglobin test. If it is not possible to check the fasting plasma glucose level after 13 weeks, patient is coming to you after 13 weeks, they will give you all the options, but either if they will give you fasting plasma glucose test, or they will give you the offer of testing
HbA.
glycated
Yeah.
hemoglobin. Okay, so both are
Yeah.
correct. Then, in the postnatal period, we don't have to offer 2-hour postprandial glucose level estimation. Like, OGTT should not be offered in the postpartum period, like that. And if at this stage their blood glucose fasting plasma is below 6, we will tell them, this 6 is very important. If the blood sugar level, fasting plasma sugar level, this is not blood, this is fasting plasma, FPG.
Yeah.
FPG is less than 6, tell them they are not at an increased risk of any problem. But if it is more than 6, then we have to tell them that they are likely to get the risk of diabetes, So what they should do, but even at 6, they should include like weight control, diet, and exercise given after the birth. But these women, they will need an annual test to check their blood glucose levels are normal. She had GDM, okay, and at the postpartum review, the level fasting plasma is below 6. Still, you will give them advice on lifestyle modification. So if they have a moderate risk of we need to tell them that they have a
So
moderate risk.
this fasting plasma glucose, is it the one done after 6 weeks, between
Yeah,
6 to 13
yeah,
weeks?
6 to 13
Okay.
weeks, yeah. And
Okay.
even after 6 to 13 weeks, you can either offer them fasting plasma testing, or you can offer them glycated hemoglobin level testing like that, okay?
Okay.
So if she had but you need to tell them that if the levels are higher, they can develop type 2 diabetes. But if they will adopt a healthy lifestyle, healthy eating, then they are less likely to develop type 2 diabetes. Then the second group can be first group when it is below 6 millimoles per liter, okay? Now the second
Yeah.
group where the fasting plasma level is between 6 and 6.9, we will tell them that they are at high risk of developing type 2 diabetes, okay? So they should be reviewed annually, they should be reviewed, and then if the levels are like increasing or persistent, then they will need advice on lifestyle, but still we will not start any treatment. Now the third group with a fasting plasma glucose level of 7 or above, now they are coming in the postnatal period, okay? The fasting plasma level between 6 to 13 weeks is 7 or higher. We will tell them that they are very likely to have type 2 diabetes, and we need to offer them a diagnosis to confirm the diabetes.
The number is similar like for the GDM when we start the metformin and insulin.
Yeah.
6 and 6.9 if they are poly, and
then 7.
large, yeah, and then 7.
So for women who are having glycated hemoglobin test at the postnatal test, we will have to tell them that that they should maintain their hemoglobin A level below 39, or glucose level is 5.7 or it is 55.7%. We will tell them that they have very low chance of developing any diabetes. They don't have very low chance of having diabetes now, and they should follow healthy lifestyle to increase maintain their weight, exercise, diet, and they will need still annual checkup to check their blood glucose levels are normal, and that they have a moderate risk of developing type 2 diabetes, and we can offer them advice and guidance on preventing diabetes, okay? That is a separate guideline, but you don't have to cover that. And if the levels are between 30, before we mentioned in the blood plasma glucose levels, now we are telling about the glycated hemoglobin levels, okay? Now the level is between below 39, very low risk, okay? 39 and 47 millimoles, the HbA1c levels are going to be 5.7 and 6.4, and they are at high risk of developing type 2 diabetes. And we need to offer them advice, guidance, and interventions in line with the NICE guidance. Like there is a separate pathway. They should adopt healthy lifestyle, and they should receive counseling in the diabetic clinic. So then what else we have to do? Like if the woman has hemoglobin A1c level of 48, that they or this is like 6.5% or above, we have to tell them that they have type 2 diabetes, and we need to send them for further care. So basically you are triaging them like that. And then those who were diagnosed with GDM but they have negative postnatal test, even with negative postnatal test, you have to offer them annual hemoglobin A1c test. This point is very important. Like even if it is negative, now we are going to offer them annual testing. Why? Because if they develop diabetes, they can be checked at an earlier level like that. So all of this information is very practical, and it is tested very frequently. So this information should be on your fingertips like that. Okay. So these are the important points for you. Any question, any problem, anything here? Okay. So when the women who are diagnosed with GDM, We will offer them early self-monitoring of the blood glucose level or an OGTT in the future pregnancies also. And we will offer a subsequent OGTT if the first OGTT result in the early pregnancy is normal. Like we talked about it before, if they have history of GDM, you will offer the test at the time of booking. If it is negative, then you will have to offer them the test later, like at 28 weeks, like that. Okay, that is the point.
Mhm.
So then we can
Okay.
decide that they are having any problem or they are not having any problem. So remembering diabetes is not difficult. It is pretty simple. So I hope that you are going to retain this information. And level 2 caring if the patient will develop any acute exacerbations or any problems. And then you need to work on the questions in a good way. Like if they're
Yeah,
giving
I'll,
you, yeah, if they're giving you postprandial blood group, like she has taken poop, like they will give you typically that the woman is a liar and she has come to attend some meeting, she had some luncheon, and then now she has come to attend her appointment, and her blood sugar level is higher. So you already know that this is postprandial, right? So if it is not
yes.
alarmingly high, you don't have to do anything. Okay? Questions like this. So read
Mhm.
the question very well because you are going to find the answer in the question only. That is the point. Okay.